Hi, Erika.
Hi, Jess.
Let's just keep doing that over. How did you first hear about Duck Creek? When did you?
Okay, I think it was through Meksin Saltarelli.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Because he had just curated a show called Gumbo in a little Lower East Side gallery, and I forgot the name of it though. But anyway, so we met then. We followed.
Was it Ma or Haw
Yes,
or Ma?
Ma.
Right.
And we found each other on Instagram. And so he invited me to do that, and then I just started, following what he was up to, and we were mutual fans. And then I saw the show that he did, the two-person show with Bill Saylor.
Yeah.
And that just did it for me. I walked into that space, and it felt like home because I grew up in a farmhouse, and there are two barns. The house was built in like 1860. And I remember 6 years old moving from Los Angeles, and we go to this barn, and there were giant pigs. I was 6 years old, so maybe they were smaller than I thought. But the one barn looks like Duck Creek. And my bedroom in the farmhouse where I grew up, I'm in the attic, and it has the same pitched ceilings with the beams, and I just thought, this is my kind of space. And I thought the work looked great in there, Bill's work, and I feel a little kinship with his expressionistic painting as well. So I thought, this is terrific. And then I wanted to apply and get to know, and I was like, and actually I think Meksin even mentioned like, oh, you'll love Jess. She's my friend. So that's how I found Duck Creek.
Right.
I hadn't heard of it before that.
I met Meksin through a gallery that I was working with, but I remember when he curated that show Gumbo, and I specifically remember the work that you had in it, and I remember talking to him about wanting to buy that work, and I did not, because I very rarely actually do that. But
I got a birthday present for you.
No. But I started following you on Instagram, and I'll say one of the things that I like, or that mattered a lot to me about both of you, is how generous you are with your social media, and how you spend a lot of time sharing the things that you look at, and sort of making sure that the work that you see out in the world that's not yours it gets a kind of a little leg up, and you're like, so exactly. I found you through Meksin, and I knew a little bit about Bill before, but Meksin I had encouraged Meksin, and I do that frequently, encourage people to apply for shows, and I had encouraged him to apply for a solo show, and he said, I really want to do another show with Bill, the one that we did at Mall. Oh no, that was at Shrine, I think, right? They're two-person show.
Because Bill was with Shrine,
right? And that gallery was quite small too. So I think Meksin had this idea that he wanted to redo that exhibition on a larger scale. And what was so cool about that, not cool at all in many ways, was that it happened. It was the second show that we were meant to do during COVID, and with Meksin's collaborative help, we determined that he and Bill were both willing to come out and hang the show and not have an opening and not have an audience and just do the 3D recording. And I think if it had not been for his kind of determination, I might have bent a little bit and decided not to open that soon. But yeah, they were great, really great people, and I think.
That was during COVID, because how did I get out there? I went there to that space, so I must have.
No, but we were open. Actually, eventually, I think it was just it was in June.
You're right, because I remember masking up, and it was very strict about all of that. But I was probably out there just to get a break from my little apartment where I stayed. Yeah. Loyal to Cuomo and don't leave the city until I say so. So I was in the city the whole time till June, I think, of that, and then I left and finally went to Massachusetts to get some fresh air. But so that's how I found you. And then my friend Eden Williams said she knew you, and I was like, oh, good. So there's a connecting thing happening here. So.
And then I'd had other friends like Elizabeth Hazen, who became a friend when she did the show at Duck Creek, and she was talking about how much she liked working with you. So yeah, we're thrilled to be able to. So Erika, you and I started talking like middle of last summer about the possibility of you curating a show, and then someone sort of put in my ear this idea that it would be really great. I think it might have actually been Elizabeth Hazen.
Okay, I think so.
That it would be a really great idea to have an artist curate a show in the larger space and then do a solo show in the smaller space, because there are a lot of artists these days that are organizing exhibitions, and it's also something, you know, for example, with Duck Creek, we have all of our shows most of them are proposal based, and we have a committee of artists who are jurying the proposals. So it does feel like, even if it's not just one artist, artists are always kind of curating our season. But
Right.
but yeah, so when we started talking back then, I just was like, sit with it, think about what you want to do. And
I was just so excited inside because I
Yeah.
had always wanted. I was like, one day I'll get to Duck Creek. Maybe I'll get in.
and now you get the 2-for-1.
I know, now I got everything. I was like, I got more than I thought I'd
Yeah.
get. So this is exciting for me because, like I said, I love that space, and I was so happy to meet you, and I think we got along well. So I've got the big smile.
Yeah,
on
me
about
too.
this.
I can't wait until June.
Yeah.
I had to get my dates correct. But so then I'm trying to imagine, we were talking, I was in the car, we were talking on the phone, I pulled over into a parking lot, and we started talking about this idea of materiality for the group show. And this concept of basically materials, right? Like at the end of the day, there are artists that focus more on concept or composition or one specific material, but so much of the work that you're making involves a lot of I want to say almost like a conflicting materials, or at least that's like that chemistry sort of is a part of what you do, and there's a lot of collage and etc. And so you started talking about this idea of materiality and throwing random names at me, that a lot of which I didn't know, but I was like, with speakerphone Googling and got really excited about what you were talking about, and this sort of idea of things not being in a traditional framework.
Conventional,
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's exciting to me. And the funny thing is, I don't know why I started with that. Well, I know why I started with materiality, but as it's evolved, then I wanted to explore also off the traditional rectilinear shape. And I'm a purist about that. So I thought, I love that these artists just throw that out the window, and they're just pushing materiality, but also space and shapes. And let's just cut out all the conventions, most of the conventions of what's known as traditional historical painting.
Right.
And I thought, I want to explore something that isn't what I'm doing, and yet it does have a similar conversation as far as our materials and the buildup and how we're dealing with narrative.
Right.
And I was, as I've been reading about all the artists I selected, I'm noticing that they all build narrative into the materials. It's not like a representational image of, say, a man at the beach with a dog. You can read that story. Instead, we're like, okay, the sand from the beach on the surface, and if there's a bird flying, we'll have a feather in there. Or, it's breaking it down into materials. That's the narrative that's being built up. I know that Daniel John Gadd, he mentioned that too at some point. But I think that we all have that in common, and that wasn't something I planned. It was only stuff that's been emerging, the similarities between all of us after just doing the research on them. But yeah, I think that it started off with materiality, and then I really just wanted to see something a little different from what I do, but within the same dialogue, I guess. I mean, I consider all of them painters, including Carl, who you'll see in the show that the work that I was going for are really cloth based, but then you read the material description and he's got pigment in there and some kind of dyes, and he considers them paintings, all of them, even the ones that he's actually painting on canvas.
Right.
He's like, this is I've expanded the language of painting within my practice. So I loved that idea too. For me, I feel like anything that's going to hang flat on the wall can be considered a painting. And I think Nicola is more of a sculptor. But I do feel that her materials, she makes her own pulp paper, and she's using found things from her studio. She's doing similar things that I'm doing. And Rachel as well, where, we might have stuff left over from old paintings and it just gets put in the next painting, so that DNA continues, so to speak. And I just found it fascinating that other people are doing this craziness that I'm doing, But yeah, so she's got wall reliefs, and then Carl has these big cloth things that could easily come off the wall a little bit onto the floor. And then Leeza, I felt, was a nice answer to Carl, because she has these cloth doors. And again, she's using material, but she's dyeing it, and she's stressing the surfaces of it at times, and she's sewing, but I'm going to call them paintings, and I think she's okay with that. She's more interdisciplinary, like she does performance and sculpt, she does all of it. But I can see like a nice common thread amongst them, and I'm trying to, I really see a good connection between Jeanne Reynal and Nicola, like an immediate one, like with the surfaces, that gritty textures, although Nicola's using different materials. Jeanne is more mosaic and cement, like pigmented cement that she used.
But they're both wall based, that are kind of like coming off of the surface rather than
heavy. They might be small, but they're like 500 pounds, I'm sure. Or they look heavy. I'm not sure about Nicola's work because I haven't touched it, but they look heavy, So I see that with them. And with Jeanne, actually, I was introduced to her work through Jen Samet, who works at Eric Firestone, and she gave a Zoom presentation of Jeanne Reynal's work, and I'd only seen a picture that Jen posted, and I was like, ooh, I gotta check this out. So I had Jeanne in the back of my head. I also am, so I was trying to think, okay, maybe I would like an older artist or an estate artist to be like the grandparent of this group. And I do feel Jeanne was born in 1901. And then, she's April 1st, 1903?
1903.
Okay, so 1903, and then she passed in 83. But I thought, that's a good starting point if I'm going to get into gritty, unconventional materials, because she did mosaics. She discovered her own way of doing that after studying with traditional mosaicists. So I thought, she feels like a grandmother who's not with us anymore, who's speaking to the ultimate exploration of unconventional materials. And I loved that. And
there's a curator named Klaus Curtis who
was famous.
Was out east for a long time, and kind of someone who I really looked to curatorially, like as a mentor. And he was always kind of like pulling generations together, like always kind of mixing up young artists and older artists. And I think that it's really important to see that continuum, that we're not living in a vacuum, and we recognize and acknowledge the kind of shoulders that we're standing on and what we've built from. So I was really happy to see that you included that work, and also the concept of using mosaic as a material is like, similar to what ceramics were a decade ago, when everybody sort of like issued this concept of wanting to use craft to make fine art. So yeah, I was thrilled that you included that piece. In fact, Jen, I wanted to just circle back to Jeanne Samet, who there's a really beautiful quote that she that I read that she said about your paintings, how they conjure passage through urban streets with colors and marks that are fresh and distinctly of our time. They evoke the feeling of moving through a timeless terrain where our words or memories are embedded in the matter, surfaces that are touched, adorned, and marred. And I think that statement speaks to all of the artists,
right.
and
all of the
so
artists.
much so to your work.
Yeah, and that's also, from the title, all the things.
Yes.
Because I loved I was reading Jeanne's essay in the catalog about Jeanne's solo with Eric, and she has that quote. That's where I got it from. It's like she was talking about a specific piece, and she said it had all the things she wanted in a mosaic, and it was movement, light, and color, and a certain spirituality. And there's something else in there. Movement, light, and color. Okay, yeah, I got it right. Can I do that over? So she said it had movement, light, and color, and a certain spiritual quality. And I thought, that's everybody in my show. So I liked that it was just all the things. I thought it would have a nice little rhythm to it. And I loved that you pointed out all the feels. Because it did, when I thought of all the things, I'm like, oh, that sounds like all the things. I was just thinking that to myself, but I didn't want, I wasn't trying to put that in with the whole statement of the show. But then I had done this painting. I just completed this painting, which is titled Feelings. And my gallery was here, and Rob Holt, who's one of the directors of the gallery, he was reading this little Post-it here where I have feelings written, and I said, well, I'm thinking that's the title for this painting, and he just cracked up. And I thought, that's perfect, because it's kind of cheesy and fun, like feelings, like, there's a song in there or something. But I wanted to go at that, like have it a little cheesy, but it is still loaded, and that, what about feelings? The whole world is falling apart right now, and we have no way to really ameliorate all of this pain and trauma, not in a proper way. All you do, everybody's telling you to take medication or something. But how do you address the intensity of what's happening in the world? And for me, it's about expressing things in my work, and just getting that out and feeling that and channeling whatever I can. So I thought it would be appropriate for my solo that each painting would express certain feelings at certain moments. They're almost like little diary pages, the size of them. So I really thought, I'm going to extend that title to the solo. And then you mentioned all the feels, and I was like, this is what's been happening with the curation of this show. It's like I'm seeing all these weird little subconscious connections that are happening, which is nice to see.
No, it's kind of a beautiful thing that you just if you build it, they will come, or sort of the ideas anyway. If you create a venue or a container for ideas, and you just kind of let them organically involve instead of forcing them into place, all the feels, all the things start rising to the surface. No, it's so just to clarify then. So we were trying to figure out. I was haranguing you about the title of the show, and Erika said to me, the title of the group show is All the Things, and that comes from the Jeanne Reynal quote, and my show is going to be called Feelings. And I said, and then when we were talking about having this conversation, I said, so like all the feels or all the feelings, etc., whatever. This is like, modern, contemporary, vernacular, cheesy, cliche stuff that we throw around. But I just love the fact that I drew the line and I was correct that you were.
I was like, she got it. That was what was going through my head.
Because sometimes you throw stuff like that out and it doesn't land, and you're like, whoops, sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
Back to what you were saying about all of the stresses and all of the feelings. I recently read somewhere that a painter who had been talking about the reason they make work, the reason they make paintings, is to linger on a moment that mattered to them, to extend. So you have a something that sort of viscerally impacts you in your life, whether it's good or bad or happy or sad, and that making art is an opportunity to sort of spend time with that feeling and explore. Sound like a therapist, but like
I know it can sound like that, but
right.
it's true.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. To just be able to, and I love the idea, because you hadn't said this before we were talking now, that the pieces in your solo exhibition, which will be on view at the same time as the group exhibition that you've curated, are like diaristic pages that kind of capture. You've been making them for what, a year? Are any of them from prior to?
A few of them are older pieces
Okay.
that I'm resurrecting, because I just set them, and I work on these at home because the size, I don't know why I can't do the small stuff here. I feel like an alchemist in many ways, and I know that this is true for most of the artists that I've selected too, where we're using materials. Most of my stuff comes from the hardware store, aside from my acrylic paint, but the shellac. And I'm constantly, I think I don't know if it's going to work out, but I love these accidents that come out of using all of these materials. Like I was explaining to you before, when I accidentally discovered this effect from water spilling on shellac, which is oil-based, and then you have water, and then this beautiful crust happened, and I thought, that's what I want in this painting. And I'm trying all these different things that just normally should not be working out, but they do. The acrylic application is very thin, though. It's like watered down.
Right.
So if I do anything thicker, the shellac will crack. So, I mean, I have paintings that are about 30 years old, and they're still looking good. So
Nice.
I think archivally they're pretty good. But yeah, then I like to take all the crazy chaos of the pores and create these clean line negative spaces, just to anchor the painting a bit and give it some structure that I need for myself, for the work. But yeah, it's a crazy process, but it is fun in the beginning and towards the middle.
Right.
And it's like a nightmare. But yeah, hardware stores, that's like my main art store.
Yeah,
I
nice.
think that might be true for a lot of artists, and certainly the artists in our show.
Right. You were just talking about Carl Hazlewood's work and we were discussing the installation of the show and sort of the sort of non-traditional nature of the works, and talking about how to actually hang that exhibition, and that Carl actually, I almost feel like I want to say like he needs to stitch them in.
Probably, that's what it sounds like. That's what he was explaining to me.
And then Daniel is making new work specifically for the show, so we don't actually even know what that work will be
just winging
as
it.
of yet. So I mean, I think one of the most exciting things about the John Little barn at Duck Creek is that space. You can't plan for that space. You can plan till your heart's content, but the best shows that we do are the ones that are responding, that are hung in a response to the barn itself. And I think that this show will be particularly exciting because those pieces, inevitably, because of the nature of their design, will be interacting with the space. And, and I think it's just going to be a really exciting show to put up.
Yeah, I mean, when I thought of those artists, I was like, who's going to look good in that? Who's really going to work well in that space? And that goes back to something you were asking me earlier, I think in an email, was, you had a lot of people you started with, and how did some of these names changed? I mean, but how I started was I just wrote down every name of any artist that I love that works with materials that in different ways. And of course, Alan Shields was like on the top of my mind about that, but he is a little famous. Like I really wanted one of those big pieces that are just prohibitive for this particular show. But he was also, I think he's the one who took me out of thinking about just the materials and about going off the stretcher.
Right.
And so when I started thinking of Alan, then Carl came to mind, and then also with Leeza, she's more in that conversation with those two. And Alan's, sewing, and so is Nicola and Rachel, and Daniel is doing stuff with glass, and he's painting the glass, and he's doing his own mosaic work too, as Jeanne is. And I read that Nicola also uses like broken ceramics that she's collaging onto the surfaces. So I was like, all this stuff is coming together. And then I even do my own form of mosaic work with this paper. I had the paintings in my last solo show. I have this ultramarine blue that I use.
Ooh.
And it's so vibrant, dries like the IKEA bags. And I fell in love with it. I'm a little too obsessed with it. So right now I'm not trying to use it just as a, there's a little bit in that one.
But it shows up, yeah.
But it shows up, and that's like become my signature. But the last show I had, I was cutting it up into pieces, and people were asking me if it was mosaic. And I'm like, no, it's just paper.
Wow.
So it must be in the back of my mind about this kind of aesthetic. Because it's in the work of a lot of the artists too that I've selected for the show.
The idea of building out of other materials,
Yeah, and I mean, there's a little teeny bit of information about Rachel and her process. She's very guarded. I can see it's hard to find her statement and her talking about the work. But the one thing I did find, I think, was Art Basel, and she mentions how she started off as a sculptor. And it turns out she and Nicola are friends. I think they went to Cooper Union together. Anyway, so she started out as a sculptor, but she didn't have money to have a studio, proper size studio. So for the sake of just being economical, she was cutting up pieces of canvas and, collaging them and little bits and pieces of the canvas. Again, maybe a stretched out version of mosaic, but collage, mosaic, it's kind of, they're not too far off, and one probably gets thrown in the craft category, but I revere craft. I mean, I came out of that. I was born out of craft. I would make, my grandmother taught me how to needlepoint and knit, and I couldn't do it that well because I'm not a precision person. So mine would go off into weird little projects. Like I would take a pair of jeans and turn it into a tree. And dear grandma, she's like, that's lovely. This wasn't quite the pattern I set up for you for the dress, but we'll take it. And I loved like making little things. I never thought about being an artist. I wanted to be an entomologist. I liked bugs and birds and all kinds of fun stuff. But that was with me when I think back, like, where did this creative thing come from? And it goes back to that, I believe, And so, there's this great program called Craft in America, and it's absolutely wonderful to see just how skilled these artisans are. And why is craft getting a bad name?
Right.
But I'm also noticing this group is coming out of that same history of craft. All of them, all of us, I think.
Yeah.
So just all these nice little overlaps are happening as I'm digging deeper now that we've selected the artists,
Yeah, that's kind of the most exciting. I mean, like, I tearfully regret some of the people that didn't make the cut, as I'm sure you did, because there's only so much you can fit, especially if you want to involve these larger scale pieces. So I want to ask you some simple questions about being an artist, but also, sorry.
I was laughing because I think your simple questions are the harder ones.
Oh, is that right? Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Maybe basic is more complicated. But first I want to ask you, how did it feel to curate a group show alongside your own solo exhibition? Do you feel like the works that you were making for this show, and this might be redundant, but of your own for this show were in any way influenced or vice versa? Maybe we already covered that. But.
Well, we may have, but I mean, just to clarify it, I mean, just what we were talking about, all the things, the bridge is all the feels, and then you have feelings.
Right.
So that's kind of, but all the feels wasn't part of my thinking, but it's just that subconscious connection I'm making. And I'm not trying to all of a sudden make, shaped paintings based on what's going on in the big barn.
Yeah.
But I just feel comfortable that I'm in the same conversation with them with my use of materials and the surfaces that I'm building up with all kinds. I mean, I cut my hair maybe once a year, and I'll cut off to shoulder length, and it's already down almost to my butt. So I've been using my hair behind me.
I noticed that. I didn't
hair,
realize it was yours. Yeah.
And I dipped it, I get my water bottles and it'll have the paint, and I dip my locks into the paint. I have to do it a lot of times. I thought it was going to come off like that, but there's a lot of sponge activity going on here. So anyway, I just love using that, and then I'm reading about Nicola using teeth and whatever she can find, and then Rachel is using rope made out of cotton, which, as a black woman, she's maybe in her own way making commentary about the history of slavery and racism with nooses and ropes. But when you look at the work, you're not going to get that. But that's kind of what Carl's doing too, in that he doesn't want to be on the nose about these are the issues about black. Well, none of us are really trying to emphasize sociopolitical material, but it could be in the work somehow.
Yeah.
Maybe it's subconsciously there or whatever. And so I noticed that my hair, I was reading about Rachel, and she's using the rope to create marks. It's another type of mark making within her work. Wow. And I was like, that's what I was thinking about with my locks, these little strands of it. I was like, that's a new line breaking up the space. Yeah. So there's lots of ways that you can say things. I mean, Leeza is from former Soviet Union, and her pieces she's been researching these doors. It's an Egyptian concept of false doors. And these are doors that are set up at altars so that the deceased, their spirit, will move on through these doors. And I just loved that idea too, with the barn and the doors. And so yeah, there's a lot that is built into the work that we might not see immediately, but it's important for us, the artists, that we are in the work. So by virtue of that, there's going to be whatever we're thinking and doing. I think it's already built in there. And that's what my former professor, Jack Whitten, when I went to SVA, he was my professor, and I was reading an interview with him, and it just the light bulb went off, because I was having a hard time transitioning from my political work from the 90s to just abstraction, and I thought, what am I saying anymore? I'm just pouring paint. Right. And I felt I needed something in there. So I do the stuff is in there. I'll have stuff where I'm doing big sweeping or written messages in these paintings in the early stages, and all of that gets buried. Sometimes you can't see it, and that's okay, because maybe you'll just see one little line of it, and that's the form that I'm interested in. So I'm looking at it formally after I put whatever information I can into it. And I think that's true for, these artists.
Yeah,
as well.
all the materials and all the marks carry a
all
history.
The things.
Yeah, all the things.
all the things.
All the things and all the feels.
But that's what Jack was saying. He said that he was getting a lot of flack from the art world because he was a black man in the 70s making abstract art. And he's another mosaicist. And he said, look, it's in there. Yeah. And, his titles would say as much too. You could tell it was something. Right. And I think I'm feeling now that it's interesting, I'm talking about the work not directly addressing sociopolitical issues, but I'm feeling that I do also sense that there is pressure as black artists to make political work in response to race, in response to gender, in response to everything. And I don't want to do that. It was too confining for me. I couldn't get the painting done the way I wanted to when I was so fixated on the research and building this representational narrative. And so I found a way to get it in the work and not have to hit you over the head with it. Right. And that's what he encouraged as well. And basically it's become kind of political to be a Black artist who's making abstract work.
Yeah. Who is Sam Gilliam, right? So
Right.
like there can be a lot about freedom that isn't didactic, that
Right.
isn't, there can be a lot about expressing your beliefs that doesn't have to be spelled out for you.
Right.
So yeah, like I kind of that's what I see, and not all the artists in the show are Black and but the idea just that as an artist there are ways of talking about things that are important to us without spelling them out for you. So
that's right. I mean, there is a luxury, especially if you are a white male, you can do these things and no one's going to ask you, like, why aren't you making political work? Like, why do I have to get the pressure about that? You know, why aren't more white people making work about politics that don't involve their race? So I'm like, I want to be like Daniel. Like, why can't we get in there and do that thing? Because that's where he comes from, like Rauschenberg, de Kooning. And that's where I'm interested in too, and Basquiat, and they're just in Thornton Dial, and I mean, I have all these heroes that are not necessarily political artists, because I love how they're using materials and dealing with, going off, the canvases. So yeah, Rauschenberg was another hero of mine, and de Kooning, and basically the whole East End area of artists inspired me.
Yeah.
That's
great. These are like great. We could do this for hours and make Bill exhausted. But so the hard questions, right? Well, and these are things that we try to draw out as much as we can. They're not hard questions. They're simple questions, but they're hard. Is like, the purpose of Duck Creek, its sort of origin was to make the arts, not only to make the arts available for free to a larger audience instead of having it feel like this sort of elitist part of our culture, but also to provide opportunities for artists that don't have the resources or maybe the professional assertiveness to have their work known. But you're a teacher. I mean, again, we started this whole conversation with Meksin and the idea that I was interested in both of you, not just because of the work that you were making, but because of the generosity that you showed, just even simply through social media. But what is it that you value or enjoy the most about teaching? Simple, very.
I love that it's a continuing conversation from my studio. In my studio, I'm in my head, I'm just getting back to overthinking things, getting too intense about everything. And then I can go to school and still be around art and still be talking about art, but now it's not my struggle. I'm out of the studio and it's now theirs that I can help them through if I can. And I love being in touch with the younger kids and what they're doing, what they're thinking. I learn about what their concerns are, concerns maybe we didn't have. I like learning about the technology that they're so adept at using. That's my community. I think that for me, the teaching world is my community outside of my solitary existence. Right. Otherwise, I'm very hermetic. I don't have children. I'm not married by design. Yeah. I'm not cut out for all of that. I mean, I'm really good about myself. Yeah. I mean, I don't even have a pet. I'm just like anything that's moving in my space. I'm like, okay, too much. So I have plants, and that's about as far as we can go.
Students.
And I have a niece, a nibbling, and a nephew. And I would say nibbling is a non-binary child of my sister. So anyway, I have them too, and they're college age. They're all college age. So I get that feedback from them, and they're all different personalities. And then I've got the college age kids and graduate students too, and they're all, between 18 and 30, that whole range. And I love seeing what they're up to and their ideas, and I love to see their studios and how they're functioning and what the order is. And that just provides some levity for what can easily become overthinking and too insular.
Right.
You know, and in preparation for the material, because I teach painting, drawing, color theory, God only knows what else they throw at me, but I'm learning that material again as I'm reviewing it for these syllabi that I have to set up. So it just keeps me, you know, keeps me stimulated, you know, to interact with my students. So I do enjoy it, and I did, like I told you before, I tried to quit, but I'm back. So it just feels good. It's a much more manageable schedule. I had to cut back, but
Gotcha.
you know, now I can do both the studio and the teaching, which
and curating the shows
and curating shows, which I'm actually enjoying. But
Good.
Yeah.
It's stressful though. I mean, I'll say just putting a season together is a lot of anxiety, but it's like, I mean, for me personally, this is the bottleneck right before we open, so I feel quite choked, but it's also the point where all the joy happens, where the world gets to now see all the things that we've been thinking about and working on, and then participate in it. Like, I guess that's part of why I was asking the question about your students is you know, and it's also the same as the, you know, like thinking about the viewer and what they give to you and what you're giving to them, and that exchange. You know, it's so exciting for us at Duck Creek to have a space where commerce is not an issue, where we're not asking artists to make a certain scale work or certain work that can fit in a price range, or a work that we know is trending at the moment and will cover our overhead. All of those things are off the table. So really what we're trying to do is give people something to look at that will make them think, that will that will encourage them and to think about things differently, to see things differently, to you know, I mean, sometimes I guess be uncomfortable, or for that matter even judgmental if that's what they feel, what the feels are. But the idea being that there's a dialogue there, you know, and so many people that maybe don't have certain resources or the courage to show the work that they're making. I mean, I just was walking on the beach and talking to a woman who was telling me that her mother had painted her entire life and never showed anybody the work she was making. And she said, "Is that weird?" And I said, "No, in fact, I think what exists now is weirder." Like, people traditionally over ages since the beginning of man have been making art for their own catharsis. So the idea is that, like, you're sharing your inner life and your catharsis and your thoughts about the world with people in a way that they can pull what they want from it.
I mean, I think it comes from also, I didn't have a lot of guidance when I was coming into the whole scene. I mean, I was on my way to law school. You know, at Wesleyan, I was studying public policy, a government major, and I loved it. And then I went, my senior year, fall semester, I went to Paris. And I decided to take a painting class at Parsons. I'd never painted anything. And that was an amazing moment because it changed my whole direction. I went from going to take the LSATs to, hi, I'm going to go to School of Visual Arts and get a BFA. And that was a silent phone call home, a big career change. But when I went to school, I was like older than everyone. I'd already gotten my degree from college, and I'm in this art school, and everyone's got covered in paint, and they're like really in it. And I was like, just not one of them yet. And I felt lost, and I thought, I wish there was someone I could talk to, or I wish I could see another person's studio and see how this all works. And then, you know, trying to come up in the whole business, it's hard. I mean, I had a few lucky breaks, so things were going well, but I knew that it was going to be hard. Like, I'm looking at my seniors now, you know, like, what are your plans? And I find that they don't have that kind of guidance.
Yeah.
And if I can post one of their, paintings on my
Right.
Instagram page and get some eyes on it, if that helps.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe in being generous because and with my friends too, I'll do that. And I have friends. I am where I am now because I had
Right.
like 2 or 3 people
did
who
it
were
for
like,
you.
check out Erika's work. And I don't see that happening enough
Yeah.
amongst my fellow artists. And, for various reasons, some artists are just a little, like, I
Yeah.
don't want to help anybody. I don't want to show you how I make a painting. I don't want any of that getting out. They're very
Territorial. Yeah.
very much so. I want to go in the other direction than that. Because, it was always frustrating when I'd be around a great cook and they don't want to share the recipes. But it's like, how much can you copy what I'm doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't care. I mean, you can try to use the same materials and
Right.
try it, but this is like a fingerprint. So
Right.
I don't think about it that way, and it
I
does
agree.
pay off. You know.
No, I agree. I don't think you can have if what you're doing is true and honest and being done from a real place of truth.
Right.
No one's going to be able to rip you off.
Exactly. So I'm not worried
Yeah.
about people copying
Yeah.
me or anything that I guess those are the concerns of a lot of artists. I mean, I have friends who are like that, who are
Yeah.
just very guarded and they don't want to share anything. But I'm going to be that sharing
Yeah.
person because I see that it really helps, with some of my students especially and fellow artists who I feel like,
Yeah.
I want to see more for this person. If I have the opportunity, I want to help them out.
And even just that's the whole concept of curating a show and the things that you gain, the things that you sort of bring into your work through the
Right.
process of spending a lot of time and making decisions like that. I
Right.
mean, expands your horizons or
I know,
your
I want to like curate
yeah.
50 shows and put all
Yeah.
my friends that I think should be seen,
Yeah, you
more.
want a full-time job at
Yeah.
Duck Creek? I'm down. So to wrap up this wonderful conversation with you in your studio here in Sunset Park, Brooklyn, I want to just reiterate the dates of the exhibition are July 13th, Saturday, July 13th through August 11th with a reception on the 13th. And this is 2 exhibitions, one of which is curated, a group show that's curated by Erika Renee, and it includes the artists Daniel John Gadd, Carl E. Hazlewood, Leeza Meksin, Nicola Pottinger, Jeanne Reynal, and Rachel Eulena Williams. That is 6 incredibly exciting artists that she has selected. And in tandem with that exhibition, she will do a solo show of small paintings in the Little Gallery. Again, that's July 13th through August 11th. And we're very, very excited about it. And thank you.
And so
all
am I.
for being
Thank
here.
you.